Welcome to NobelBiz webinars. You'll meet industry leaders and learn insightful information for your contact center business. This is Manage the Unexpected: How to Gain the Competitive Edge of Remote Work as a Contact Center.
I think we're ready to go, and if we're all set, so appreciate everyone for joining. Looking forward to having a great discussion today. I know everyone's really busy, and for many, actually, it's a tough time right now. So you taking some time out of your day is appreciated, and hopefully we get something good out of today's discussion. So my name is Christian Montes. I am the Executive Director of Sales for NobelBiz. I'll be your host today. Hopefully I do a decent job, but I'm really lucky to have two great people with lots of experience from two different perspectives joining us today. So first, we have the great Christa Heibel on. She has over 26 years of experience in the industry, specifically in the contact center space. She's CEO of CH Consulting, huge advocate in the industry. And then also, of course, we cannot forget, she is a certified yoga instructor. Extremely important, very mindful, right? So Christa, thanks for joining. So if there's any bit you want to add around that I may have missed in introducing you, or some things you'd like to add for everyone to kind of understand your expertise and where you come from, I'll go ahead and give you a quick moment to add in something.
Well, I think you did a good job, and you made a nice little cut back to our podcast there and our talk about mindfulness as a leader. So I like that. I'm blessed to work with a great team of experts in customer experience and contact center operations and cloud and omnichannel tech strategy. And we work with organizations small and large across multiple verticals. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about what's going on in this strange times and the challenges that our clients and our business partners are going through, and hopefully share some good information of value today. And I always like talking to you, Christian.
Well, it's mutual, and I love always having you on. So looking forward to it. And then for those of you who've seen one of our other podcasts, we have Jake Bush, and he is the CEO of InFocus. There's a story behind the name, and I'll eventually let him tell that through his podcast. So if you haven't seen it, please watch it. And obviously with Christa's as well. Please do so if you haven't already. But Jake's an entrepreneur. He's really pioneered a lot of business practices in the on-demand contact center platform. And we're happy to have him here. He runs his own contact center business and specifically has some great experience in managing in this in particular environment. So Jake, thanks for joining. Happy to have you on. And please add in some color as well to your experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christian. And it's always a pleasure to be there. You always make me sound and look better with the questions and the direction, so appreciate it. It's an interesting time because, we come from the brick and mortar call center world, kind of moved into the virtual world, and really kind of fell in love with the hybrid concept. And, there's different spectrums, and we've learned a lot through this process, but fortunately we've been very prepared to, react fast and swiftly through it. And I think it's allowed us to really kind of prove some of our past concepts and theories. So it's been a really exciting time for us, very opportunistic time for us, but thankfully we've been prepared to be able to navigate through this very well. So it's been more excitement than stress. And we joke that we're working harder than we ever have before, but we always work hard, and Monday's the same day every day, as my team likes to say. So every day is a Monday, but we're excited to work, and we've got a great team throughout the country.
That's awesome. And I think it's a good segue to kind of just add in a little bit of context here for today's webinar, is we're talking about adaptability to remote work, the transition companies made to do so in that immediate moment, and then obviously what they're doing now, and then potentially now looking at the future, right? So I wanted to kind of nail two individual items or stats that were, I think, interesting to kind of look at. Is one was that it looks like as of the pandemic, over 80% of job seekers, if they could choose a job that had a flexible work from home policy, they do so, and they find it as a benefit. And I can just imagine for those, there's a balance between those that can't wait to get back into the office because of their current environment, or those that just really now feel that working in a remote environment is the most important. And separate from that is businesses are starting to look at what the future will look like for both, as you mentioned, Jake, the remote world and their brick and mortar environments, and what that'll look like for the future. So, with those pieces in mind, Jake, let's start with you. Let's look at your journey. You said that this was relatively, a Monday for you, right? So the moment you heard and your state and your business said, hey, you got to work from home, walk us through kind of just how that experience was for your business, your agents, and your leadership.
Yeah. Well, I think, we're virtual first. So we really started this company in a virtual first mentality. So everything we do is through Slack and video conferences. And we have a very, virtual first environment with everything that we do. So ironically, before the pandemic started to show its face, we actually were focused on bringing more people into our offices, into the brick and mortar world, and actually spending more time kind of in culture, face to face. So it was an ironic time that kind of, we were kind of shifting a little bit more to brick and mortar, but prior to that, we were very virtualized. I think the biggest challenge that we saw when we got, when we closed down our offices and we went full virtual, some people were super stoked because there was no longer the requirement to come into the office. Some people were unsure of where to set up their workstation, where to find peace of mind in their home so they could actually focus. And I think the biggest challenge that we didn't expect and never thought about before was parents, right? They're at home now, they have to tutor their children, and they're kind of the school teacher on one hat, and then they're running over to work on their normal day-to-day job. And I think that has been the biggest challenge for us, is navigating through the at-home dynamic, where previously everyone was working at home in kind of a structured work at home environment, and their kids were going to school, their significant other had a job that was leaving the house, so they had their schedule down, and this kind of disrupted that whole schedule. So it made it very difficult for them. So that was one of the biggest challenges that comes to mind that we didn't prepare for and we weren't prepared for. And it's certainly something we're still trying to figure out, what does the new normal look like in that type of environment? But yeah, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, and Chris, I'd definitely like to get your thoughts on here. But for a lot of businesses, it was the shift of going from brick and mortar to remote, right? And you're going, well, I was already in remote, but now I'm dealing with the dynamics that this new version of remote encompasses, right? And you just stated it. You've got people that are parents, your spouse is there, potentially significant other, you have other people in your environment, which complicates. So Christa, I know you've worked with a lot of different companies in that transition, and you've seen both styles, right? So kind of walk us through some of that experience for you and what your customers are seeing, and what you've discussed with them around that topic.
I think one of the key words that Jake used is environment, right? And so when we have assisted, even prior to the current pandemic situation, organizations in creating and developing an effective work at home model, we always talk about creating kind of a guide to workspace, right? Like really addressing that issue with agents about the environment, where to set up your space, how to create boundaries in the house with whoever else is around so that you're allowed to kind of focus. And so we have been helping clients deal with that. And I think Jake also alluded to the fact most individuals, and the statistic that you gave at the beginning, are embracing this move, but it's not for everybody, whether kids are running around or not. I think when we look to post this situation, there's going to be some really interesting hybrid models like Jake really had built prior to this situation, with a combination of both capacity still remote, or remote workers still remote, and then some in the office, and some combination of that, because it's just not an ideal environment for everybody. So talking about that, helping your staff work through that and think about tactically what and how they can create that space for themselves permanently or temporarily, and giving them kind of a guideline around that, including some of the technology requirements, is kind of a helpful technique.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think a lot of times we first thought, just get people connected, get them on the internet, get them a headset, get them a computer, right? And now we're talking about from that crisis mode for those who had to do it quickly, or for Jake, you were already doing it. Now the next logical phase comes in. Okay, now I've have phones calls going back and forth. I may have other channels communicating as well, but now I'm dealing with these situations, right, where you may not be in the best physical place in your house. You may be in an area where it's not a good environment or the ideal environment. You have to balance these things. So I can imagine there's staffing things that may come up relating to availability of people and the ones that have kids versus doing other things in the household, to your internet. If you have good internet there, I can imagine that some people are still receiving calls on maybe their cell phones versus through some other system. So when we talk about the present state where now people are taking calls, right, or at least there's some portion of business that made that transition. Now we look at environment's important, but how do we now look to the next phase where how do we start creating improvements where possible, or where have we seen improvements where maybe we didn't realize that we were going to get those? Because some of the common things I've heard is we transition and all of a sudden we started seeing improvements. Do you see, Christa, on your end, where those improvements came from and why they would have came in?
Yeah, so I think, and you and I talked a little bit about this, that there was, there are companies that had already embraced virtual work, like Jake's. And then there were organizations that philosophically and or technology-wise were not as prepared for this. And amongst the group that had not embraced work at home and remote work, I think there was fear, right? And there was a lot of concern around loss of control, loss of performance management, and some of the people management components that you get used to when you're working in an office environment. And I think for the most part, what most of our clients have found is that it was not as bad as they thought it was going to be. They've actually seen improvement in attendance. Go figure. One of my clients called me like shocked a couple weeks ago. First ever recorded 0 attendance issue day, right? And so they're finding that other like key performance indicators and KPIs are improving in some areas. And so, this is something research had said for a long time about work at home. There's been research over the last 8-10 years around a higher caliber employee in certain areas can be found, and that certain performance metrics could improve in the right environment and with the right tools. And so I think that's going to change again post all of this. That the model, I think most of our clients are going to be looking at maintaining.
The honeymoon stage is something we've experienced in the past, right? It's the honeymoon stage of like going home and you're like, I'm free, I can work whenever I want. This is awesome. I can wake up and not change, not shower, and just go and work. And we've experienced this same honeymoon stage in the past. And that's really what shifted us back to the brick and mortar and the hybrid environment is there becomes this disconnect, and there's, complacency kind of sets in, engagement starts to fade away. So for us, the importance about both worlds is it's culture. And what we drive culture with in a call center world is games and promotions and competitions. And doing that in person with like a cash cube where you're trying to grab cash is really hard to create in a virtual environment. But finding ways to inject gamification into the everyday, workflow in a virtual way, in a virtual setting is just mission critical for us. And, interesting, WOW app is something that does a really good job with like leaderboards and engagement and, different gamification types of stuff to keep people interested. But if you're sitting in your own office all day long, you don't have much, physical, social conversations in person, it changes the dynamic. So it's really, really important to be ahead of the curve there, because trust me, the honeymoon stage will start to fade. And if you're not prepared to inject that stuff, it'll be a little bit too late. And some people will just hit burnout and will have a hard time getting back to that kind of urgency, that performance, and that quality that they had before. So just wanted to inject there, but sorry for cutting you off, Christian.
No. It's awesome. I think, Christa, you wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, because I feel like I so totally agree with that. And, in my first company back in like 2002 to 2008, we had virtual workers or employees. And I learned back then it's just not for everybody, right? So some people will overperform in that environment, and that level more of like kind of like focus is a positive for them, and others, in the absence of that direct interaction and social component, start to disengage, right? So I think the hybrid, how everybody hybrids that, because there is, to your earlier commentary, a certain portion of the workforce that is going to adapt, is going to like it, whether we think the honeymoon period on their performance is over or not. They're going to want to maintain that freedom or that status. And so businesses are going to have to be creative from a recruiting perspective, and still be able to manage, the business, right? To some of Jake's points. So.
Yeah. And I think the dynamic of the personalities, or even the people that thrive in an environment that's remote versus one that's brick and mortar, and maybe even a hybrid, right? People that maybe come in once or twice a week or 3 times a week, and then vice versa, they work remote for the rest of the time, or vice versa. It really comes down to, okay, let's talk about hiring, right? And staffing. Predominantly, if you were just in a physical brick and mortar location, you were probably hiring for people that could get to that physical location, right? And now you have a different pool of people to go after if you're looking remote. And then if you are looking at brick and mortar, are you still staying with these very large centers in a centralized location, or actually creating smaller ones and dispersing them closer to other population centers? So have you, Christa, seen any of that, or any thoughts on what companies could do around being able to hire the right person that works and excels in remote work versus ones that maybe do it better in brick and mortar?
Yeah, we've helped put together, I earlier talked about that guide to setting up a workspace, right? And like how to like create a successful work at home environment. We've flipped that around and worked backwards on that to find ways to screen and do Q&A with agents, right? So there's certain like testing their technology bandwidth and capabilities as one of the hiring criteria, and asking them to describe what their work environment might look like and what that means to them. There's some really specific questions around to get a good gauge, I think, on that. But I sometimes, hiring in this space, even in a brick and mortar setting, is never been a formula I've perfected, right? So I think there's always an element of doing your best in prepping any applicant for what your culture and expectations are in-house or at home, right? But the technology and bandwidth access is one of the big ones that you got to make sure is in place. Jake probably has more direct experience with that.
Yeah. So Jake, from your side of it, do you look for anything in particular, or do you have hiring practices or things that, your HR department looks for when you're actually looking for people that are remote versus in the brick and mortar?
Yeah, so we actually, when we went to a hybrid model, our version of a call center went from a 10,000 square foot massive, commercial space to a 2,000 square foot, kind of hip, industrial type of look, where it's a little bit more of a training center opposed to a call center, where you're going there for quick check-ins, quick social events, a little bit of competition, but it was really designed to be just more of a hub for training. So the training component of it is really important to our business model. And a big part of the brick and mortar is that process of meeting someone face to face and understanding how they carry themselves. And when you're just looking at a TV or your computer monitor screen, there's a lot of variables that you don't really interact with in a conversation. So a big part of our training process has always been in our physical center for a 2-week period of time, where people, conduct themselves in a different way. So that's been an interesting challenge for us as far as kind of creating that same environment, but in a virtual setting. And to Chris's point, you never really perfect hiring or recruiting. I mean, you always need to be adapting and changing and being new and fresh. But we are having a hard time with replicating that same type of experience with weeding out some of the people that don't fit that model, right? And I think as a result of that, the commitment and the reliability has not been as good, right? Where prior they had to drive to the office, they had to dress nice, they had to be on time, with variables like traffic and kids screaming in the background. So there was a lot of variables they had to juggle to be prompt and be timely. So the ones that couldn't make that kind of weeded themselves out through the process. But now that weeding out happens a little bit later. So it's just really kind of changed how we view talent when it comes in the door and how that kind of filtering process happens. So definitely a huge difference there for us as it relates to that piece of it.
So to kind of finish up, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for our customers, it's interesting too, because we're software first and marketplace second. So a big part of the software component is moving our customers' internal customer service team and internal sales team onto the software. And that's part of our onboarding process for our customers. So we've actually created this remote work audit now, where we're doing a remote work audit for our customers, making sure that they're prepared to work within this virtual environment. And then our marketplace, to be able to provide that scale and overflow, can complement it. But it's been interesting to basically perform that work audit or that remote work audit for our customers as well.
Mm-hmm.
That brings up an interesting topic, and we'll kind of throw it in here at the end of this, because I hadn't thought about it, and I think it's important to talk to it. Is you have remote agents and you have remote supervisors and leadership that's running the business, but you still obviously, if you're a call center, especially one that is doing work on behalf of your customer, and you're not an internal center for your own business, you still have to work with your customers, right? And you still have to interact with your customers and meet the requirements of their business. And you have to do all of that remote now. If any of it was ever in person, or they ever came to see your facilities or to see your leadership in person, that communication now is, for at least the time being, forced into a remote fashion. So it's interesting that you've started adopting ways to be able to engage in that discussion. I don't know, Christa, if you have any insights into that or any feedback before we kind of hop on.
Well, we help organizations go through the BPO selection process, right? And I am a huge proponent of finalists having an on-site visit. I mean, and that again, which is even in a virtual environment, is sitting down with leadership in an office, right? And knowing and having that face time, just like we're talking about in interviewing, staff and onboarding them, same with hiring vendors and partners, right? And so, obviously that has not been possible. And we have some very large enterprise clients that were in RFP processes. And so they were in final phases and all the travel got canceled. So we did a lot of virtual tours, and I'll tell you, it's not quite the same, right? But really what it ends up equating to is a lot of video time, right? So even back to the conversation about like hiring and how do you staff, like a lot of our clients have added additional interviewing steps, like added 1 or 2 more interviews that are being done by video, again, to try and have that extra time. So the quality of the time may be different than when you're face to face, but you're adding quantity of time to try and figure that screening process out. And so I'd say that same thing has applied on the client side as they're trying to evaluate and hire, because there are still contracts being signed and implementation happening in the market today. A lot of that final assessing is having to be done this way, and that takes a little bit more time, right?
Maybe you need to be able to look at what the environment looks like with your agents, all of those different items. Let's kind of start with you, Jake. when it comes to the most important things that you think the leadership needs, when you talk about crisis leadership, crisis management, was there anything in particular you can think of that helped push you and your business through this moment, and going forward, things that you think are really critical for you to be successful?
I mean, I think the most important word is communication and being proactive with the communication. So we opened up these town hall meetings with everybody in the organization, all of our customers, all of our employees, all of our contractors, and really just an open forum to just talk through, you know, what's happening and what's how we're interpreting it and what our strategies are. So it's been a really cool way to, you know, people that usually we didn't have a chance to connect with because we didn't have this open discussion. I think communication is the most important thing, you know, and being proactive with the communication about the planning process, not about, hey, this is what's happened and this is what's been done, and more of like, you know, the post communication, but more of the pre-communication and getting them involved into the brainstorming process of here's what we're seeing and here's what we're thinking, you know. And it's been a little bit uncomfortable for us because we're putting ourselves out there to potentially, you know, overpromise and underdeliver, or not deliver at all because we're just brainstorming. So, you know, it's had some pros and cons, I think, but I think overall it's been very, very important for just leaders to be able to talk about the process, right? The process of what do I see and how am I as a leader interpreting it? And what am I doing about it as a leadership, and communicating that in an open forum. So we've had some great success with that. So we have started these town hall meetings because of this crisis. But certainly we're going to continue doing them, you know, on a bi-weekly basis going forward because they've been really, really impactful. And, you know, we've also created some opportunities. We're actually, you know, we're sending test kits to our employees and contractors, you know, blood test kits, at-home test kits for the antibody testing. But that, I think, opens up a cool thing of just like sending, you know, packages, like care packages, right? You know, how cool would it be to just, you know, you get a package in the mail and it's from your employer and it's got some cool swag in it. So yeah, I think, Christian, communication, it's a simple word, and it's something that you can't do enough communicating right now. So over communicate. And I think being proactive in the brainstorming session is what makes it raw and real and allows leaders to really shine because they're natural leaders, and it shows in that conversation.
Well, that's pretty awesome. You know, I think one of the points we want to talk about is how is your leadership going to help build trust among your team that basically cares for your business. They're the front lines of your business. And in a time where it's difficult for them, they have potentially an environment that's not optimal, right? There's a lot of external stresses outside of, you know, everything from their spouse and their kids, being a teacher, income, uncertainty of the end of the pandemic. How do you get those touch points being remote to make them feel like there's somebody out there that actually knows they're alive, that they actually thought of them, or that what they say matters, right? So that communication is huge. And it's kind of awesome, some of the things that you're doing as a business. Christa, you know, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, have you seen anything like that? Any specifics around what companies are doing for that building of trust and implementing that crisis management and leadership?
Yeah, I love the care package idea, Jake. I think that is super cool idea. Yeah, because I think so. It's about communication, right? Like if Jake could have been on our podcast talking about leadership, right? What is leadership about? It's about good communication and having a plan and being flexible enough with it, and taking feedback about how it's working to know how to lead in different, you know, and modify as you go. But it's about communication all the way. So some of the things that we've seen our clients doing to do that is extra like employee like roundtable groups, you know, having Zoom or video conference calls that are allowing them to talk to their team and communicate as a team about what's going on right now, right? So not just this internal, oh my gosh, everybody's gone at home and is my connectivity up and when do I get off my cell phone and you're going to give me my soft phone and all that internal stuff, but like also talking as leaders about what's going on in the broader world today, right? I mean, change is not something that people always embrace. So I consider myself to be a change manager, right? That we go in and change things all the time. People hire us to come in and help them do that. and people react to change very differently. So we might be excited that we get to go work at home until we find out our 3 kids, 2 dogs, and spouse are also with us, right? But there's fear in our culture today, right? There's fear globally about what is going on and what does this mean. There's financial fear. And so I think a lot of our clients are doing a great job about creating forums that are allowing their staff to talk about that too. And, not ignore the why we're having to all be dealing with what we're dealing with right now. And processing that. So we have a lot of groups doing, again, the video conferencing, a lot of employee surveys and feedback, and just trying to keep those lines of communication open. I think that's key.
I know you had mentioned chat, but in internal chat or internal messaging, do you see it being more outside of it transactionally, meaning in that moment there's the need to get something from a supervisor or to talk to somebody, but do you see that those systems or other systems are now being used independent as a tool for these updates, these conversations, these interactions, or these types of passing information back and forth? Or do you see these more going towards like video, where everyone is actually joining like a Zoom or another type of video conference where people are having these interactions?
I think we see operations using chat tactically, right? Like, that's one of the ways that we can communicate, right? We're talking about a particular like contact center environment, but really any team environment where employee to supervisor can be communicating tactically on what needs to be done. When we're talking about creating culture and a broader conversation, I think it's video conferencing, teletown hall technology, where it's a little bit more personal forum, right? I'd say that's how we see that deployed.
So when you see video, obviously when you're having a big audience, you can only see so many people and it's only so interactive. Sometimes it can be one to many when you're talking to a really big group. But to have it more conversational, do you see people going into smaller groups to have those conversations, or does it still become these big groups where you're kind of just one of many?
No, I think you got to manage the size of that based on what the communication is, right? So, and what level of interaction that you want. Jake used the term teletown hall, and I don't know, I have a political background. And so there literally is the political teletown hall platforms that I've worked on. And I've always been a big proponent of those for more open dialogue. You don't necessarily have the video component always with those, but I think you have a platform to do more open discussion. But no, you don't, you want it to be about effective communication, right? So the medium needs to be adjusted to the intent of the message and the level of interaction you're looking for.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I think the follow-up is really important, that it goes into smaller groups, right? So town hall opens up the broader scale of things, but what comes from that is usually a lot of questions, some concern, and a lot of loops that are unclosed, right? So I think breaking that out into smaller groups, and we think 8 to 12 is really the sweet spot. Over 12 is too much. Really under 8 starts to become not as productive either, from a collaborative standpoint. But I think breaking out into those small groups is really critical to closing the loops and getting deeper into the intimacy of the of the discussion or the topic or solving the problem, whatever it may be. So yeah, Christian, I absolutely believe the small groups is a really important piece.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think we've seen the same thing as well, is that if you need engagement, but you also don't want to have so many people overpowering the engagement that other people can just kind of disappear into the background and they don't have to participate, or maybe their voice isn't as important if they're not able to actually be part of the conversation. And so right now, there's definitely a lot of people that are forced to be in a remote experience. And that, like Christa said earlier, it's not for everybody. So those in particular people, knowing who those are and what you can do to help them perform, because it's at no fault of their own, right? That's not their ideal work environment. And that's kind of what they have to do. So how do you, as a leader, be able to care for those that were great employees in a brick and mortar, but maybe they just don't perform as well in a remote environment? is there anything from a leadership perspective that you can think of that helps you be able to help right now during a pandemic, those that aren't performing as well anymore because a remote environment actually is not optimal for them? I know you talked about environment, but you got any specifics or things that you could say that they were good performers before, and now during the pandemic, something's caused them to not perform as well being remote? You got any advice or best practices? I know mindfulness is one.
Yeah.
Or you're asking. Oh, no, Jake.
Oh, yeah. No, I think it sounds kind of cheesy, but I think health and wellness starts to become a really important part of that, right? Because when you never leave your home, mental health and health and wellness is really a big part there, right? So it's about, encouraging, go do some meditation before you jump on, do some yoga in the middle of your class. So we're looking at trying to figure out actually, like, so since we're like gig economy experts at this point, we're thinking about, bringing on some like yoga instructors and Pilates and different types of those health and wellness, nutritionists, and delivering those kind of tools virtually and allowing people to check out, and go ride the stationary bike or do some jumping jacks. I mean, just small things to get like your blood moving is really, really important. I think, catering to the mental health side of things, embracing that and encouraging activity and health and wellness is really critical. Something that we think is a big component of that. And then of course, on the motivational side of things, it's about just getting into the world and creating promotions and competitions and like things to like drive for, bring something that hits that person. Some people it's praise, some people it's cash, some people it's just, competition and wanting to beat somebody, right? So I think it's really important from a leadership perspective to tap into the individual and understand, is it health? Is it, is it wellness? Is it competition? Like what really drives that person? Because knowing that they're not leaving their walls of their house very often right now, it's a challenging environment, but those are tools and some things that we have been doing with some success.
Once again, I fully support Jake. Of course, I love the wellness and health focus, right? I've been complaining about the level of carbs that I've been consuming in the last 39 days in my house. And I am a yoga teacher, right? So no, I think that shows great sensitivity, Jake, on your part as a leader. And that says a lot about the kind of culture I'm sure that you create. So from a technical perspective, when it comes down to being able to identify those that are struggling, that's all there today, right? Like performance management between, keystroke recording and screen recording and voice recordings and KPI dashboards. And it's not hard to identify who from a performance perspective is trending in the wrong direction in this environment, right? And so we have all the tools we need to kind of isolate and approach in that situation. But I like the sensitivity that Jake is talking about from a leadership perspective, that some of that goes to, again, some sensitivity to the current situation and the adjustment, right? And the human aspect of all of this, which we can kind of forget sometimes. We're talking about tactics and processes and tech, but there are people in their lives disrupted in all of this, right? And I really want to go rogue on you, Christian, and maybe this is another webinar, but as we're talking, what I'm thinking about is all of this focus on internal, what is this doing to customer experience? Because I've had some fantastic customer experience in the last 30 days during this, and I've had some horrific customer experience in the last 30 days during this, right? So we're all doing all this to make sure that our customers or our customers' customers are still being taken care of, because they're going through the same fear-based change and crazy we are today. And so we can get so internally, environmentally, technology, performance, how are we doing wrapped up? I can name some organizations that have forgotten what they're in business to do, which is still take care of their customers, right? And that's a whole nother component of this that has changed and we have to be careful about. This may make or break some brands, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I'll tell you right now, at our business, we twice a week, we do yoga with an instructor. All the company can be invited, and those who can come, and we're on video, and they record them so you can look and do them later if you can't participate. And I was not a huge yoga person. It's not something that I liked or disliked. It just wasn't something I was doing. And I find that I look forward to it now because it's that moment where I truly can disconnect for a little. It's not home life, and it's not the work in the work environment life. It's this pause button that allows you to just look and think and feel something different and engage. We wanted to show a quick demo of a product that hopefully allows to companies, as Christian was saying, that can enable them to be able to put in play all these things we've talked about, the best practices, the environments, the management of their employees. But now how do you translate that into the interactions you have with your customer, the consumer, right? And so me as a consumer, I reach out, and I'll tell you right now, this week and last week, I've had some really good experiences and some of the worst I've ever had. And as much as I want to give companies the benefit of the doubt, you can tell some have gone the extra mile to know that things are not going to be as good as they were potentially, and to at least prepare you. Others, it seems almost like, well, deal with it. And so I won't go any further with that, but I think enabling companies with the tools that are needed so that you can still scale, you can still interact, you can do so through various channels where needed is important, right? And I know, Jake, you have a lot of requirements for your remote work and being able to communicate via different systems and software. I know, Christa, you have all kinds of systems you have and recommend to companies, and companies utilize, and how to optimize them. So if we don't have any major questions right now, assuming we may have lost a lot of people on that transition, what we could probably hop into right now is diving into the demo, kind of being respectful of everyone's time since we're towards the end of it. We'll go from there. And then if we have time at the end for those who want to stay on for a few minutes to answer some questions, we can. So what I'll do is I'll ask my team to see if we can go ahead and show a quick demonstration of a product that is designed for this type of environment, and seeing what it looks like and how it works. So I'll go ahead and have my team jump on that, and then we'll see if we can get that going and working for everybody.
Thank you for joining our webinar. This part of the webinar, we're going to go over the NobelBiz OMNI Plus solution. The focus of the solution is going to be on how we connect our remote or home agents. I'm going to explain to you how the application itself has the ability and the flexibility to give your agents connectivity from anywhere in the world. Essentially, all they need is a browser, a laptop, and an internet connection. There are no phones, no external phones. There is a WebRTC phone that's embedded within the application that allows the agent to use voice. Over and above, we're going to go over some other interactions, social interactions, email, web chat, and so forth. In order to access the platform, each agent will have a shortcut on their desktop. This shortcut is essentially a URL, a link to a web page that runs, again, right straight out of your browser. Our browser preference is Chrome. We enable WebRTC. This avoids us of having external or third-party soft phones to run. This allows you to seamlessly and easily connect your remote agents to the platform. This is our login screen. So when they click the shortcut, they'll get access to our login screen. Now, based on the login credentials, you'll have access to one of the three modules. First module is the agent desktop. The second one is the supervisor, which we'll look at in a few minutes. The third is the administrator. Okay, so we're going to log into the platform. Click connect. And this is our Omni Plus, NobelBiz OMNI Plus interactive agent desktop. Top left-hand corner are some of our states. So we can click ready. Face-to-face, we can have a one-on-one conversation with a prospect or a client, or an inside sales environment. If we click campaigns, we can view our campaign information. History, we'll look at that in a minute. This actually gives you historical information on each one of your transactions. Request chat is to communicate with a supervisor in the event the agent requires assistance. On the right-hand side, you have our telephony toolbar. where you can make a call, hang up a call, do a transfer, put the caller on hold, do a conference, and we also have an embedded DTMF tag. We can disconnect the agent. So when the agent is done for the day, they disconnect from the platform. Then you have the information on the agent themselves. So it's GSarukas, extension 500. And then you have information on the queues, how long the medias have been waiting in queue, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to click ready. The agent on the far left-hand side, he's ready to start working. He'll click ready, and we'll have interactions coming. Okay? The first interaction is going to be a voice call. So we're going to generate a voice call. And as you can see here right now, we have a screen pop. The screen pop has been designed within our application, which we call our scripting tool. Now, the scripting tool can be customized. The drag and drop interface, we provide this within the platform. You can create custom fields. You can create workflows for your agents. You can add comments, conditional branching. You can connect to third-party applications. You can launch CRM applications, for example. Here we have a button where we launch Salesforce as an example. Okay. During a call process, if we needed to send an email, we have a shortcut to do an email, so we can, from a call, transition over to an email. So we can send an email to this contact. We have predefined attachments library. We have predefined templates. So the templates will populate the information that we received from the call in the scripting tool or the CRM and add them to the email. Okay? Now, so we answer the call. Very simple. Over and above inbound calls, we can handle outbound calls. So we have a full predictive dialing system that with multiple dialing modes, predictive, preview, progressive, agentless, which is a message broadcast system. Okay. So at the same time, I'm going to try to give you an experience of the customer perspective and the agent perspective. Okay. So I'm just going to move my window over a little bit to the left and bring up a virtual phone that I'm mirroring on my screen. So the left-hand side of the screen is the agent, right-hand side is our customer. So I'm going to say hello, and that interaction is going to go over to the agent. At the same time, while we're waiting that to come into queue, I will go to Telegram and send another message in Telegram. Furthermore, I'm going to go into Facebook Messenger and send a message in Facebook Messenger. So what we're doing here is we're sending multiple medias, multiple interactions to this specific agent. Now, again, you can customize what each agent gets based on their profiles, based on their skill sets, their experience, and so forth. So I have 3 conversations. I am also going to, as you see on my screen, I am also going to send a tweet. So the system is monitoring the NobelBiz demo tweet. I will tweet that, and that will come up to the agent as well. Okay. Over and above, I'm going to go into my email, and I am going to send an email. Actually, Josh, can you send the email, please, to the platform? Okay. So what have we done? We've logged in the agent remotely. They can our home agent directly from the browser. No VPN, no Citrix, no third-party applications to connect to it. Again, all they need is a browser, embedded cell phone within the application. So what can we do during the interactions? So if I take, for instance, the email that just came in, on the left-hand side, each tab represents an interaction. So we have an email, we have WhatsApp, we have a phone call, and we have Telegram. Okay? So in the email, we have the ability to reply to the email. So I can very easily reply to the email. We have predefined attachments and templates. Now, over and above, I can, from the email, navigate to my customer tab, where I will capture the information automatically from the email. So I create a record in my database. Okay? Now, within this environment, I can toggle back and forth. So the important thing here to retain is that regardless of the media that is coming in, I can seamlessly transition to another media. So if I'm in, for example, an email and I need to transition to a phone call, we can do that. If I'm in a phone call and I need to transition to a web chat, I can very easily send them a link on Messenger as an example, and we can have a conversation on Facebook Messenger. So all this is very relevant. Now, if I go back to my call and I select my history tab at the top, I can then see all the transactions, regardless of the media that I've had with this specific contact. I see that there was 2 calls. I see that there was an email. There was a Facebook Messenger conversation, and there was a WhatsApp conversation as well. I have the ability to go bring up the record. So if I need to bring up, for instance, the conversation that I had with this specific contact, Josh in this case, I can see all the information. So if somebody called into the call center to your customer service and said, I yesterday had a conversation on Facebook Messenger, but nobody has gotten back to me, the agent can go search very easily within the application to go over the conversation that they had in order to complete his call or his interaction. Okay? So after every single one of the medias, we're going to have to disposition them. So regardless if it's a call, email, social, a Twitter, a tweet that we responded to, or Facebook Messenger, we disposition the calls. What was the reason for the interaction? We sent them an email. We solved a problem in customer service. It was a billing inquiry. It was a complaint. They called us or they sent us a message in order to change their primary address. Okay? So this, in a nutshell, is a quick overview of our Agent Interactive Desktop. It's true multimedia, true omni-channel experience. We can record all the calls as well. We control everything from A to Z. Now we're going to go over to our supervisor screen, which are our dashboards, to show you how we control the agents, how we monitor them, what performance metrics we can monitor, KPIs, and there's different tools within the solution in order for us to properly manage and monitor their performance. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a typical dashboard. Okay? The dashboard views consist of 3 main windows. Agents, we can monitor our agents, we can monitor our campaign performance, and then the services. Now the services I haven't displayed on the screen because those are essentially a group of campaigns. So a service is a group of campaigns that can be any media associated to it. Okay? Now, before I jump into this, it's important to understand, like the agent, the supervisor screen runs straight out of your browser. Again, nothing to install locally. The phone is embedded. There is an integrated WebRTC phone, and the WebRTC functions within the supervisor environment consists of the following. These are the tools. So if we look at our agent view and we select one of the agents, here's what we can do. Okay? If we take an agent, the first one on our list, we can put the agent on break because he forgot to go on break. We can disconnect the agent at the end of his shift. Maybe he forgot to do that. On the extension tab, we have the ability to call the agent, to speak to them directly. We can monitor them discreetly. We can whisper coach them. And we can also conference myself and the supervisor, the agent, and the caller. We can monitor their screens, view their screens discreetly, and take control of their screens as well. I can go a step further. I can actually view one of the transactions and all the details of the transaction, everything from the time it came into queue, from the time it came in, how long it was processed, what was the disposition, what was the outcome, what were the notes. So you have a full 360-degree view of each and every one of the transactions. Okay. So we monitor our agents. Now, if we go over to the campaign view, we can monitor our campaign. So regardless if it's a social campaign, a web chat campaign, email, call campaign, you have the ability to monitor how many are in queue, what are your service levels, how long they waited in queue. You can see how many abandoned interactions you've had, and so forth. So you can actually go into it and you can see Exactly. So here, this channel type at the top left-hand corner is a telephone channel. You can see when the last transaction was. So you have all different metrics of how many calls we've taken, all the different dispositions, performance indicators. So you can have a full view of the performance of the campaigns. Now, over and above the campaigns, we can set alerts. So I can set alerts on any single one of the metrics that are available to me, regardless if it's for a service, for an agent, or for a campaign. So we've predefined some of them. This is why you see at the top right-hand corner the little red light that's blinking. Okay? This says that there are 14 alerts. So we've created some alerts so you can say, have they exceeded their break time? Have they exceeded their talk time? So if their breaks, for instance, are 15 minutes and they've exceeded it by a few minutes, then the supervisor will be notified. If your average talk time is 2 minutes and there's somebody on the phone, if there's somebody on the phone for more than 5 minutes, then the supervisor will get that alert. So these are different alerts. You can basically set these alerts for any single one of the KPIs that you want to monitor. Okay, so that's it. This is a quick overview of the agent and our supervisor screen. I thank you very much for your time. I just wanted, again, to talk about the accessibility of the product, straight out of your browser, nothing to be installed locally. It takes very, very little bandwidth. We're looking at 100K per agent for voice and data. Full control, true omnichannel experience, fully customizable.
So I think just a quick piece on this item is, I think from our last webinar, there's a lot of companies that still don't have a product that meets their needs, or that maybe meets their needs to the level they need it to. And so if and where it makes sense in your business, NobelBiz is providing this in particular solution through the pandemic up to 6 months for the licensing of the product at no cost. So basically, you're just going to be paying for the usage of your telecom service. So if that's helpful or useful to your business, you need to be able to access this kind of functionality, bridge a gap that you have in your business. We definitely want to be able to support you as best as possible during these difficult times. To really recap, I think what we've all discussed today, Christa and Jake, is part of it is it was hard for some. It wasn't as hard for others in the very beginning to just get people on the phone. Now it's seen there are some challenges, everything from environment to the leadership you have to take to get engagement. And then ultimately, and I think you said it best, Chris, is what about the customer at the end, the person that's actually calling in or receiving that phone call? How did their experience actually get improved or not degraded to a point where you're getting some of the interactions we've had where we sit there and go, gosh, we may not want to do business with this company post-pandemic or even during this pandemic, right? So maybe the hijacking for another conversation will definitely be around those items, right? And I'm happy to have it with you. So, but beyond that piece of it, I think now when we look at what we can do to improve engagement, how do we make sure we maintain performance, improve performance? How do we make sure that the customer is cared for, that they're in a position where they're not the ones who get the short end of the stick? Because ultimately, all of this is so that that experience is positive and as positive as possible, right? And I think what we do every day with our agents, with our supervisors, it comes from the top. And I think, Jake, you've said some amazing things that you do as a leader in your business to propel your team to be able to be ready to deliver on those requirements, right? And Chris, obviously, with all your great advice and all of the things that you keep in mind, including mindfulness that we always talk about, how do you provide that stuff to be able to have that interaction and make it better? So I appreciate everyone's time. Look forward to further discussions. Jake, be safe, stay healthy. Krista, be safe, stay healthy. Appreciate everyone's time and patience, but we'll let everybody get to the rest of their day.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Krista. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.